Hello and welcome back.
Hello.
How are you today?
Oh, doing good.
Good.
Waking up.
All right. Um, this episode is going to be about psychedelics. We don't really have much of an outline. We're kind of just going with the flow. Um, we're going to be covering just the different psychedelics that we have done, our experience with them, physical explanation, spiritual explanation, how they impacted us, um, and just any other details we kind of think to cover. We are going to explain what the differences are between them. She's done a few more than me that I haven't experimented with. So she's going to explain how those are a little bit different than the mushrooms and LSD, which is the two most common, I would say.
Yeah.
And then, most definitely. And then she'll just explain, you said ketamine, DMT, and MDMA, and she'll kind of go through those, touch on those, her experience with those, and then we'll both just kind of come together at the end and talk about just the lessons and other details that don't necessarily involve the immediate experience of those drugs.
I'm excited.
Okay. Also, disclaimer, we're not encouraging the use of drugs. Please do your research. And not psychedelics aren't meant for everyone. They can be a very good tool for growth, but you don't need them to grow as a person. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I'm a huge firm believer in psychedelics presenting themselves to you when the time is right. It's a really People who have done psychedelics know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. We'll touch on that for sure.
Yes, but don't ever do them in a situation where you're not feeling safe, you're not with someone that you trust. It's always set and setting is very important. I kind of talk about that a little bit on the other episode I have, talking about touching base on the actual like science of psychedelics. This is going to be more about our personal experiences rather than just what they are.
Yeah, and I think psychedelics also, obviously they can be fun and like it can be something that you do to enhance like a fun experience. But I think mostly for me, whenever I try to do that with my psychedelics, it becomes uncomfortable. So I would just say personally, if you are going to do psychedelics, I would encourage you to do them in more controlled settings because it seems to give the best outcome for growth.
Yes. And I always tell people psychedelics aren't a party drug. At
No.
least for me, mushrooms and LSD, I do not want to. Zuko, he's trying to eat my tarot deck. They are not a party drug for me. I do not feel comfortable being around people that I'm not um, comfortable with, and sometimes it'll let you know that you're not as comfortable with someone as you thought you were.
Some of the
Be,
oh, go ahead.
yes. No, you
I
can
was
go.
gonna say, sorry, some of the drugs that I'll talk about at the end of the episode, MDMA, ketamine, even DMT can definitely be like a type of like riding the line situation. I'll talk about it more when we get there, but I've definitely used those substances in more like a social setting and it had an enjoyable time. But yeah, I think for the most part, the more controlled that you can be and not in like a party setting, right? You're gonna get way more out of it.
Yes, and it's a tool. I think that they're definitely tools for growth. There are some. I'm not saying that the whole experience is like you're getting shown what you suck at or like what you need to heal. There are very fun experiences that I've had just with psychedelics that didn't. It just was healing to my inner child, and I wasn't thinking about. I wasn't having an existential crisis. I have had one multiple while doing psychedelics, but the whole experience doesn't consist of like these serious conversations with yourself or the serious monologue within yourself. It can be very fun and freeing as well. So don't get scared. Our disclaimer is not meant to frighten you. Just we don't want you guys to be led astray on our standing on who and when and where and what.
Exactly. Just be safe. I mean, listen to yourself. You know yourself best. If you're uncomfortable, don't do it.
Right. All right. So to get started, how would you describe psychedelics if someone just asked you for a umbrella statement?
Like someone who has no prior,
Like someone who's the type of person that think like LSD puts holes in your brain, you're gonna look like Swiss cheese, like that type of person.
I think I would say, first of all, everything that you have been told about psychedelics from the media, maybe not everything, but pretty much everything, for the most part, like 99% of the stuff is lies. You're definitely not going to get holes in your brain. It is, using psychedelics for me personally has been the most impactful, influential thing that I've done for my growth, as far as my understanding of the world goes, my understanding of myself and other people, and how we are all connected. I don't even know who I would be without psychedelics. I literally don't even know who I would be. Probably a really bitchy person, honestly.
Depressed.
And I mean, not that I haven't like dealt with mental health struggles, but psychedelics are not the reason that I have had mental health struggles. They're the reason that I've been able to overcome those struggles and understand myself. And it has been so impactful for me. It literally changed my life. And I do feel like it's my like responsibility to share my experience and talk about my love of psychedelics, honestly, with people, because it is something that can change the world if people use it correctly in the correct setting. It's been so impactful for me.
I agree. I would there's like a certain, sometimes people, they'll ask questions, but you know that they're not in a place to be willing to hear what you're saying, you know, when it comes to psychedelics.
Yeah.
So normally how I describe it is very similar to you, of it's one of those things where I too was the type of person that was very unsure, very wary, like, you know, I heard all the wrong things about it, definitely thought that it was terrible for you, especially acid and stuff, everything that we hear about it in the media demonizes it and makes you feel afraid of it, telling you that you're going to go crazy, you're going to like jump out of buildings, you're going to do all these things. And then when I finally had my first experience, same thing, it was very life altering for me. And I always just tell people you have to be willing and ready to not ever be the same again, and not in a way of you're going to be a completely different person, but you're just going to be a more compassionate and understanding version of, like, almost like stepping into your higher self. Like you're going to be almost forced through a spiritual awakening. And if you're not ready for that, I would definitely, you know, take it slow. You can take smaller doses and not necessarily get as much as that of that like ego death kind of experience.
Such a crazy experience.
Yes. And it's just like, it's one of those things where I tell people it's not a party drug. You have to be ready to use it as a tool for growth. And if you don't set an intention, like, it's going to set an intention for you. And it may not be the direction that you wanted that experience to go. And just make sure, like, you have to do your own research, because no matter what I tell you about my experience, I know that everyone's experience varies. And so I always just tell people, watch YouTube videos, watch what other people say, look up like reviews, because everything's different. And obviously everyone has a different life experience to lead up to that moment. And anything that you went through is going to come through. And not all the time is it negative. Most of the time, I have never had a bad trip. I don't know about you, but
no, I haven't.
yeah, I've never had a bad trip.
I've had challenging experiences, and I've had times when I wasn't necessarily like laughing or happy during the experience, but never a bad trip. Always super
like never scared.
No, never scared. Always safe, for sure. And that's you have to make sure that you do that. When you like commit to doing the substance, you have to understand that you committed to doing it. It's not going to go away. Once you put it in your mouth, whether it's mushrooms or acid, after you hit that bowl of DMT, you are going to have the experience whether you want to or not.
Buckle up, kid.
You gotta just be like, I am in control, I am safe, I'm not scared, I'm not in danger, because you're not. But
and it's very, people have the misconception that it's like when you're stoned and you can't really understand or comprehend what's going on. You're very logical and you can very much understand what's going on. It doesn't impact your ability to like, I will say, if you're at the peak experience of like LSD, it can be very like, it's easy to get, it's more so because you're just super overstimulated, but you can still be very logical. Like I could sit there,
what's going on,
right? I could sit there and think to myself like, okay, I know that this is like just the drug. I know that like the concept of people like jumping out of windows or like seeing things that aren't there. I've never seen anything that's not there.
Real. That's hallucinations, and that's not from psychedelics. That's from other drugs that make you have actual hallucinations.
Right.
When you take psychedelics, you don't hallucinate.
Right.
I mean, you have sometimes visual discrepancies, like things do move.
Right.
I don't know how other to explain it.
Right. They wiggle around, okay?
Wiggle a little bit. It's a little bit wavy, baby, but it's definitely not like you're not hallucinating. Right. Everything that you see is there. Even if you don't think that what you saw is there, it is. You saw it.
The only thing that like colors and stuff, like
they get a wicked brighter, definitely.
Right. Like I'll see colors around people, or very subtle things that maybe aren't there to my naked eye, but make sense to me.
Heightened, right?
Right.
That you actually are paying attention. You're like, so when you take, especially mushrooms or LSD, I think when you take those drugs, you're so like aware, and everything is heightened. It's times 10, right? So you might see things that normally you're like, oh, that's not normally like that. That's not normally there. But in reality, I think half of that is the actual substance, and the other half of that is that you're just paying attention.
Right. I agree. Especially like we'll get into it. But no, we're both like this and this. But okay. So your first experience, both of our first experiences were with LSD, acid. They're the same thing. Acid, I think, sounds a lot scarier, so I always say LSD. Yeah. But either way, they're the same thing. So if you hear it on people talking about it online, whatever, they are the same thing. What was your first experience? And just walk me through just how that was for you. And you kind of touched base on it last episode, but go into whatever you feel is necessary.
Yeah. So my first experience with LSD was in South Dakota in Spearfish, and I was with a group of friends. It was, I think there was 5 of us. Let's see. Yeah, there's 5 of us, and it was all people who I felt really like safe and comfortable with. We were doing it at one of my friend's house. His mom was out of town. And so we went over there, and we're like trying to get acid. We're like messaging people, whatever. And then one of my friends like got some from an older person that we knew. They came over, brought it to us, and it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock at this point. And it was really cool because later on, I actually ended up living with this person who brought us our first dose of acid, and he became super like important to me. He's definitely family. But we took the acid. I think we took 1 tab, which like that doesn't mean a lot because acid is a liquid. So when you take it on a tab, a piece of paper, Somebody took that liquid and they dropped it onto the piece of paper. Sometimes they just dip it into the liquid and pull it out. Sometimes they drop it. Rarely do they measure it when they drop it, I think. I don't think that's like super common. I mean, unless you're
Hard to as well. It's just
super hard.
so.
Yes, I know somebody who accidentally took
I know exactly what you're doing. You guys, it was my ex-boyfriend. So, anyways.
I just start laughing. So I know somebody who accidentally took like 15 tabs at once. So like, please do not, like, be very careful if you're gonna take it from a liquid form. You need to just take like the tiniest amount, like really tiny, or just don't even take it in a liquid form. If you're gonna take a tab, start with half. Just really pace yourself if you're nervous about it, or just go for it and take the tab. But that's up to you. But so we took it, whatever. And it starts like kicking in, and it was just a weird. So this is like the super shortened version of this story, but basically the whole time I was tripping, there was like all this weird stuff going on with me, with my friends. We were having like these kind of like scary-ish like encounters. My one friend, like, there was a doll in this room in my friend's house, and it was super weird and scary. And they're just like, oh, this doll's fucked. Like, close the door, keep that doll in there. Don't go in that room. Nobody's allowed in that room. Like, keep the fucking door shut.
Right.
And then it was really cold in the house, which was weird. I mean, it was in the middle of winter. It was like February or January. I think of my junior year. I can't remember. Might have been my senior year though. I think it was my senior year, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. And I kept wanting to go outside because how cold it was inside, which was weird. But also, personally, when I do psychedelics, I like to go outside and just like walk around a lot. It's really grounding, and like it's nice to be outside and not be in an enclosed space and like have fresh air. That's what I used to do in South Dakota when I lived there. I would just take LSD and like walk around town.
Me too.
So much, and just literally walk from one end of Spearfish to the other end.
Yep.
But so we were walking around, and like obviously everything was like super overwhelmingly beautiful. That's like the only way I can explain it. Everything was so beautiful. I think I kept saying that over and over again. I just kept saying everything's so beautiful, and I was going like, oh my gosh. That was like all I was doing. But in my mind, so many things clicked for me that night. Like, I just realized how connected everything was. That was for me like a turning point for not being religious anymore and just being spiritual, because I was like, everybody is like doing the same thing. We're all believing the same thing. We just are putting rules on it for no reason, right? And I really am a spiritual person, but I don't like follow religion, because that night literally showed me that it's all the same. I don't know. It was very interesting. But something that made my experience really real, my first experience with LSD. So like I said, we had like all these weird experiences where we were cold, like people were getting freaked out about the doll in the room. One of my good friends was sitting in a room, and he was looking at the closet, and there was like, we just were sitting in the other room, and we heard him say like, help guys. So we like go in there, and he's like, there's something like in the closet. And like at this point we were like, all kind of like realizing that we were all having like these weird kind of like almost like paranormal experiences happening to us, but we hadn't really talked about it thus far. I don't think we really even talked about it until the next morning all the way. But there was a moment when I was standing at the window with one of my friends, well, with Tyler, and we were looking across at the house that was like next door to my friend's house, and there's this face like in the window that Tyler like saw, like this white kind of like head in the window, and it looked kind of like demonic a little bit, or like, I don't know, just like
Creepy.
otherworldly, not
Right.
like of this world. And Tyler says, if you're real, make a move. I don't remember if he said that in like internally or out loud.
Mhm.
But then like the curtain shut.
Ew. I remember
And
you telling me this. Every time I get super creeped out.
it's so crazy. So the next morning, as a group, we end up literally going to my friend's parents' house, and her mom and dad are just so, oh, so amazing. They sat down with us, group of 5 teenagers, and we were like, we just did acid, and this is what happened, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And kind of they like walked us through it, helped us process that. And that was really also an influential part of this experience, was that having somebody to help integrate what I had just went through
Right.
immediately after it happened, who was somebody that I trusted, who was someone who was an adult that could really at that point like make me feel loved, supported, and comforted to have a space to like talk about that experience.
Mhm.
And when we started talking about that experience, we figured out that this white headed figure, I do believe, is like a demonic or like, I don't know, negative energy entity that is maybe trapped in this house, or like, I don't know. But
Maybe that explains why it was so fucking cold to you guys too.
yeah, I think so. So we saw this picture. My friend had a picture that was taken at that house 6 months or more before we had taken the acid there. And he was wearing a shirt that said, "Have a nice trip" on it. And it had like a melty smiley face. It was a tie-dye shirt. And in the background behind him, there was like what
An
you
orb or
say
like
is an orb like figure. And it was like that white like figure with the head in the window. And I just, to me, it's not a coincidence that on his shirt it said, "Have a nice trip." That was not like his first time experiencing the drug, I don't think. But regardless, the coincidences are too, it's too
and
much for me.
what a fucking wild first experience.
Oh my gosh, I know. It was very
Yo, because I can't imagine. I've never experienced like a paranormal. I've never really had any like paranormal experiences, but to me, there's too many that people do have to discount that they're true. And I'm the type of person where if I haven't experienced it, like I believe it until like I believe people's stories. Like I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that you're not being honest. Like there's
like,
just too many people telling stories of paranormal or unexplainable energies or entities for me to discount that there's not some truth to it, right? And I do believe in that kind of stuff. I don't think that we're alone in this universe. I think there's a lot that we can't see. There's a lot of energies that we can't see. I don't think that we're like the only sentient or conscious entities on this planet, obviously. And I do think that some of them are just in energetic form.
yeah, no,
So,
I definitely agree with that. That experience was super wild.
yeah,
But
what the fuck? I would have literally just I,
that experience,
and it was your guys's because it was all of your guys's first time.
no, it was my first time, and I think one other friend's first time.
Okay, because I was like, if it was everyone's first time and everyone's like, what the fuck? And then the creepy doll and shit, like, yeah, I definitely think that your first experience is a little
negative,
unfortunate.
it sounds negative, but really,
It's not negative, just like very wild to experience, especially us knowing, oh, there's a spider. Us knowing,
oh, there's a spider. I'd be like, hold on 1 second, there's a spider.
but us knowing now how psychedelics are and just knowing that like that was your first experience is really funny.
I'm like, why literally why? But it's okay, it was so much fun. And it really did, like, it didn't scare me. I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. I was like,
you're like, is this it's like one of those things where you have to like do constant reality checks where you're like, is this happening? Is this happening? Like, is this real?
No, it's really crazy. And it's not like things happen that are unexplainable, but to other people they sound unexplainable. But when you're experiencing it, you're like, no, this happened and it made sense. Like, this happened to me. It made sense that it happened, when it happened, and how it happened. But someone else is like, okay. And I'm like, no.
Right. Yes. My experience, my first experience was a lot more chill. I did start my very, very first time, I did start with half a tab. and I didn't get visuals at all. It was just more of like that kind of euphoric feeling, but I didn't really get much of anything. It almost just felt like I was just in a really good mood. Like it was just a half a tab is a good place for most people to start, where you can kind of feel like that tense feeling in your chest when it starts to come up. Maybe there's slight visuals and things are enhanced, colors look pretty, everything looks pretty. Um, but my first true like full tab experience, I just remember I was with TJ, our really good friend,
For you.
of course. And it was Earth Day, and we were picking up garbage at Game Farm.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. And it's so weird for me because when I actually have trips in the moment, everything is very clear. I know exactly what's going on, but it's almost like a dream when I come out of it. I can't remember details as much. I try to write things down when I am. Uh, oh, this didn't happen until further along in my experiences,
Yeah.
but I tried to write things down and remember just even like some thought patterns and stuff that I was having that would come up. But it is very weird. I think it's because our brain can't really process how much stimulus is going on. One thing that was very prevalent to me the first time I did acid was being able to hear, like doing a full tab, being able to hear things from so far away.
You hear so
Like,
much.
I don't know how to describe it to someone who has never done it, but I could literally hear like someone, if invited a friend over. So in Spearfish, South Dakota, you guys, there's no cars on the street at fucking 2 a.m. Like there's no traffic. It's silent. There's no one there. So if I invite a friend or tell someone to come over, I can hear them coming from blocks away, like in their car. Like it's so wild. Like I don't know
No, it's
how to
true, though.
describe it.
It's true.
And and you can hear things just so differently. And also seeing things, yeah, you get visuals, but for me it was also like the detail, there's such this weird blend between being so detailed and being not detailed, because when you really look at something you can see every little intricate detail of. So for example, one time I was doing acid and we were looking at someone's fingertips and they had just really gripped something tightly, and so we could see like the blood rushing to the fingertips, and we could see like where we could see it, and it was really weird. And I had never experienced that. It was Trey's cousin,
Like you
and
can.
we were like looking and we're like, because he
It's
was
just
just
like,
holding a painting, and so we thought the paint was on his
oh, I
fingers.
remember.
Yeah. And we were like,
You can just see things so much. It's something that you see. Okay, if you take your fingers and you squeeze your fingers
Right.
together, you can see that they're white at the tips and then they
Right.
turn red, which is exactly what you're explaining. But when
Right.
you're on acid, you see it and it's so detailed.
So
In a
detailed.
way, it's like your entire perspective has changed. And so
Because it's like, if I can see this now, am I just not paying attention?
you see this like thing in such a different light. It's like literally like somebody like switched the lighting in the room or something, and you like are seeing it like
You
so
just see everything in like ultra 4K all of a sudden. And it's
yeah.
so weird. And you just notice, like, for example, if I'm just laying sober in the grass, like watching the wind, you just kind of see like the chaos that the wind is causing. But when you're on LSD or even shrooms, you can see where the wind starts and how it all, like, you can see the pattern of the wind in
How it-
these trees, in these plants. Like, you can see how it's not just like chaotic, everything's just like going amok. It's these waves of wind that all move together, and you can really see exactly like she talked about, where you see how interconnected everything is, because you can see how it all operates as a unit rather than seeing things operate individually. So you can see how the wind affects the plants and where it starts in the distance, like you can see it coming. And you can also hear how like birds are actually communicating with each other and just different things. You can see how everything really is operating together. And it's a very to someone who like to Noelle knows exactly what I'm talking about, and other people who have done psychedelics know exactly what I'm talking about. But someone who has not done psychedelics, that can sound very like confusing. And it's one of those things where you just have to do it to understand what I'm saying, because I can sit here and try to explain it to you, but you will not see it with just because of the perspective that you have right now. Like it just does really switch your perspective on a lot of things. It did give me a deeper reverence, not only for like one, I think I may have touched on this before, but it made me feel very small in the order of things, but also very important, like as an individual. Like it made me realize like, yeah, everything's connected and I'm a very small part of this interconnectedness, but everything is connected. And so if my cord is severed for whatever reason, I leave a gaping hole because of just the exponential impact that I have on people indirectly as well. And so it made me realize how important I was individually, as well as just as a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a really like concise way to put it.
Right.
You recognize and realize that you are insignificant, but at the same time you're not. You are important. It literally is like the reason that I know that people say this, you've probably heard this quote somewhere or seen it somewhere. If you're into anything metaphysical, which if you aren't, why are you listening to this podcast? No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Modestly metaphysical. You're not into metaphysics. Okay.
I'm just kidding. Anyways, but it's like you are the universe experiencing itself, right? And I think that doing psychedelics really solidified that for me. Like, we literally are all so connected to each other. I know because of the experiences that I've had, and particularly with you, Kara, like we are in each other's lives for a very particular reason. And the like synchronicities and the reasons that we have found each other again. I know that psychedelics has influenced that. And I also know that like doing psychedelics has solidified that these things are not happening by chance.
Right. Yes. And that's one thing. It really opens your eyes to things, and you can kind of put together some pieces where it did make me more spiritual, I think, because it did change my perspective on a lot of things and made my personal life experience a lot more meaningful. And then for me, I never once felt like there was a time where I would do LSD. I would literally only wait to do it again so that it was fully digested out of my system. So like the typical 2 weeks that you have to wait for it to be gone completely, or for your tolerance to reset rather. And so I was doing it for a long time, just every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. And
yes. LSD, or did you do any mushrooms?
At that time, I have done mushrooms. At that time, I had done them, but not in doses that equated to my LSD experiences. So at that time, I hadn't done any where I got any visuals or anything, just smaller amounts where I could feel it. My pupils were dilated, whatever, but I didn't do larger doses of mushrooms until the past recent couple years. Okay. But I never once felt like I was addicted to it. I just simply was trying to get as much of like, as I had access to it, I wanted to use that experience to be able to learn what I could with the drug's help. But my ultimate goal was to have those experiences of clarity and thought processing sober. So it didn't make me feel reliant on it whatsoever. And it's a very weird drug in that way of it's not addicting, and like it feels very nice, yeah, but it's not the type of drug where you're like itching to do it again, because it is very exhausting emotionally, spiritually. Yeah, and I have had trips where so I think I mentioned this on my other podcast, but LSD lasts anywhere between, to me, it's usually no less than like 10 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's a very long haul. Mushrooms are usually the longest, usually it lasts around 6 for me.
I was gonna say about half is usually my experience, depending, like if you take a bunch, obviously
it's gonna take a while,
last a little longer, but for like the doses that I've taken, I would agree.
And so I have had trips where I'm just like, okay, I'm ready to be done now. Like I'm ready to just go to sleep.
That's the hardest part of acid, I will say. Like you are definitely gonna be doing it for a hot minute, and if you aren't prepared, like one really good thing and something I always do is like eat fruit when I'm coming down from acid.
Yep, same. You don't eat anything processed, you are going to feel so gross.
You're not even gonna want to eat anything.
No, you're gonna want like some fresh fruit on hand for when you're starting to come down. I usually get really hungry on the come down because I used to be walking like a motherfucker. Like I would just be walking.
You're not really eating the whole time, so
you don't feel hunger.
No, you don't. If you can drink those naked like fruit drinks while you're like doing it, or like a smoothie, or like anything with some like sugar and carbs, you're gonna be fine.
But you definitely, most of the time I did it at night. I've had more night trips than I did day trips. I love day trips now that I've like done it before. The only reason it was night is because I was trying to hide it from my parents. That's about it. But day trips and night trips are also very different. Night trips, I mean, it's so weird because you can see every little detail. Obviously your pupils are dilated, so things seem a lot brighter and you can see a lot better than you would think that you normally could at night. But I just, the experience in itself is something that I hope that everyone can kind of be able to do one day.
I think if you're interested in it, most definitely, like,
do your research, of course.
Maybe, do your research. Maybe don't like seek it out super like intensely, but definitely if you put it out there that you are interested in it, like
it comes around.
Probably will,
especially with, let's get into mushrooms now. That's LSD. Mushrooms for me, the largest dose, I've never tried to do a hero dose or anything. I do a lot more microdosing than I do like large trips. The largest I've taken is just an 1/8, just like
I think that's the most I've taken also.
That's the most it's very more emotionally exhausting than LSD.
Hard on your tummy also.
Yes.
Mushrooms can be a bit hard on your tummy, so I'm a puker. I like to puke a lot when I take substances. No, I don't like to puke, but my body does not like to hold it in. So mushrooms are something I have to be really careful with. If you can find anti-nausea medication to take with your mushrooms, or like even doing like holistic anti-nausea stuff like ginger with your mushrooms, grinding them up really smally, making mushroom tea. Oh gosh, I keep eating this.
I always do smoothies, but I also have iron gut. I will not throw up. Like it's so hard to get me to puke, and I just like I'm very blessed in that way, because that's the one thing that I know would feel like it feels, I know, so uncomfortable.
You can find recipes for mushroom tea, and what that is basically you take the mushrooms and you put it with something acidic like lemon juice.
Helps like a lemon tech.
It breaks it down a bit before your body has to break it down, so it just helps like it not be so hard on your stomach. So that's my suggestions if you're
honestly, if you want to take a large dose, I would just do acid. Like, I understand some people want to go the mushroom route because it's natural, but if you're looking for like the intense psychedelic experience is similar.
They're like, mushrooms are great. I have this mushroom dress on right now. But I love them in microdose so much more than I love taking them in a large dose. And microdosing them, literally, I think when I first moved to Colorado, I was working at this chiropractic office, and one of my coworkers was like, I'll get you like mushrooms if you want them. And she got me this bag of mushrooms, and I kid you not, these mushrooms literally smelled like chocolate. It was so weird. They smelled like straight chocolate. Anyways, I took microdoses of those mushrooms for so long because I had so many, like 7 grams, which is like when you microdose, you take 1,000 or 100 milligrams, maybe like 80 to like 120 milligrams, depending on your weight. And then, oh, my cat wants to come in. She's like, meow. But when you take like a full dose, 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. So 7 grams is like an infinite amount of doses. And that's what made me really get out of my first depression, I think, that I experienced as an adult.
Yes, I tried microdosing LSD. It's such a process to try to do that though. Just with like having to soak it and then have like the water and like or whatever you use to, and so it was just a long process. But with mushrooms, it's really easy. And I will say that it's such a beautiful experience, like
Oh, sorry.
to microdose because you get a lot of the same benefits of a lot more heightened awareness. Things look really vivid and beautiful without the visual trips. It's just like, for example, I was riding my bike to the gym. This was like when I moved here, and I've been microdosing, and I just was being really, really aware of how I was feeling. And there was a cool breeze, but every time I would go past a parked car, it felt really warm because of like the heat coming off of the car. And that's not something that I would have normally recognized, I don't think, if I hadn't been microdosing.
Yeah.
And just things like that, like little things, like the little nuances of life that we don't really pay attention to as much.
Yeah, I think for me, microdosing also, like, I don't know, it just really, oh, here's the kitty. Excuse you, ma'am. Do
Thanks
not
for showing us your butt.
Camera. She's not very modest. Sorry.
Let's start her an OnlyFans with that content.
Only cats.
Only cats. Oh man.
All right, Missy, if you want to be in here, then
She's like, I just want to cause a ruckus.
I'm gonna put her. She likes to go on top of this. Like, this thing behind me is actually a bed. And I just put this tapestry over it to make it look a little prettier because I have it in my guest room and my thing, but she likes to go up there, so we'll let her.
Okay, microdosing.
Microdosing.
How do you feel about it?
I think that microdosing for me, the things that I notice are like mostly mood changes, but also, yeah, everything just seems a little bit brighter. Like your problems don't seem as stressful. You like just naturally have a little bit more energy. I think when you do psychedelics, they do give you a little bit of like energy in the moment. So microdosing, like in the morning, you know, it just helps you have just that a little bit of energy throughout the day. And like, I love caffeine, I do, but psychedelics give you a different type of energy. It's
yes,
like
I agree. It's like an internal energy.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is the last large dose, not the last large dose, like a couple doses ago when I did mushrooms, like wanted to do a bigger kind of dose. The first one that I did here living in California, I literally deep cleaned my whole apartment. And like, I was like, I had to, like, I couldn't not do it. And those who are spiritual know that when you're tripping, it feels there's something that feels really good about just having a clean environment where you just, it feels good. And spiritually, I think knowing that keeping things tidy also keeps the energy tidy, it makes sense. But I literally started in the kitchen and couldn't stop myself until like the whole place was clean. I don't have like a huge apartment, like this is California, so I just have a small 1-bedroom. It's like good enough for me. But I cleaned everything and I reorganized. I made sure everything was tidy, and it felt good to do that. That wasn't like a typical thing for me. I don't think that would have happened if I would have done LSD. But then the next trip that I had, it was just very creative. I wanted to just like make art. I wanted to cry. I just wanted to like do those types of things, but it was the same dose. Just like my brain wanted to do different things. And for mushrooms, I think that it really helps you get your shit together. Like, honestly, if I'm like going through something either mentally or, you know, most of the time, everything's mental, even if it's like a physical thing that's going on. It's like our mental awareness of it or our mental processes of it that make it suck.
I think
And so I had like trouble cleaning at that time, not necessarily like cleaning overall, but just like keeping things tidy. That's just like little messes, you know, the stupid things that are easy to clean. And my brain was just like, let's just do a hard reset. And I was like, okay, like let me just follow this. It's weird like that. It'll kind of help you break through those weird addictions that we have, even if it's like being addicted to being sad.
Yeah, it definitely like psychedelics in general, I think in the moment you're like, oh, this is overwhelming or this is whatever, but you do end up having those like deep introspective kind of like realizations when you're doing it. I don't know. The last time I remember taking a large dose of mushrooms, honestly, I was still in South Dakota, and I think we took an eighth of mushrooms, but that shit hit me like a freight train, bro.
Some of them are stronger than others. That's another thing. Be wary of that, you guys.
So we went to Iron Creek. We were camping there, and we took the mushrooms when we got there, and like walked around Iron Creek. And if you know Iron Creek Lake, it is tiny. It takes like 30-45 minutes to walk around. If you're walking slowly, it's like maybe a mile around.
You can see the whole edge of the lake.
The entire lake. Yes, exactly. It's really small. So we walk around this lake, and as we're walking around the lake, I kid you not, I am just tripping dick. Like everything was so blurry for me. And my face, I don't know if it's because it was like the grasses around the lake were causing me to have this reaction, or what, if it was the mushrooms. My face was watering, my nose, my eyes, everything just watering. I was crying like so much. I was literally bawling, walking around this like just bawling, face watering from like
everything.
Everything. And then we get back to the campsite. Everything's like pretty normal. I'm like not tripping anymore. And for me, that was just such a crazy mushroom experience. That's a big reason why I think I don't take large doses, because I was like, oh my gosh, that was intense. For like,
I feel like it purges.
I definitely think that was part of it. And what I wanted to say was, so mushrooms, I believe the active ingredient in mushrooms is psilocybin, but I think when your body breaks down psilocybin, it breaks down into psilocin, which is a similar, like psilocybin and DMT are both found in nature. And I think that mushrooms and DMT are similar, especially like more so ayahuasca and mushrooms are similar to me, because they do involve this like very intense, almost like your body is taken over type of experience, and then you're purging so much during
physically
that time.
And emotionally.
Yeah, that's why I puke a lot, I think, when I take mushrooms, because it's just like purging that stuff out of me emotionally. Yeah, you're purging. LSD is a lot more like
logical.
Yeah, and mushrooms are a lot more emotional, I would say, for sure.
Right.
In small doses, I would say they can make you notice things in a more logical way and be more like emotionally
in tune.
Like, yeah, exactly, with yourself and like the world around you. But in large doses, they can be a lot. I would still encourage people, like, if they're interested in doing a large dose,
I always tell people to work up to it.
Yeah, like, work up to it.
Like, wait until you no longer have anxiety at a certain dose to dose up. That's how I kind of explain it to people, of like, especially with acid, I'm like, start with 1 tab. And when that feeling of like, when you start to peak of like, oh shit, when that feeling goes away and you feel like yourself really flowing at that dose, then maybe like challenge yourself. Or like, if you feel intuitively that you've learned everything that you can at that dosage, or with that dosage's assistance rather, then move up.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's
Okay.
going slow is much better.
Yes. And then you have also done DMT, MDMA, and ketamine.
Yeah.
So touch on those. I'll ask anything that I come up with. I need to find my laptop charger real quick, but I'm listening.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, take your time. So DMT is a very psychedelic experience. MDMA and ketamine can be, and they're a lot different than LSD and mushrooms because they don't last quite as long. DMT in its raw form is maybe like a 15-minute trip. Ayahuasca is a form of DMT. It has an inhibitor, so your body just metabolizes DMT very quickly. So that's why the trip doesn't last very long. But when you have ayahuasca, it lasts a lot longer because your body is prevented from breaking it down so quickly. And it's definitely the most psychedelic, like out of body experience that I've had recently. In the past year or like 8 months, I did DMT with a close friend of mine and Tyler, and they I say I did it with them, but they babysat me while I did it, right? Because when you do DMT, like, you usually smoke it out of a pipe, but you have to heat it up quite hot. So you can, like, I did it like out of a dab rig because the stuff I had was kind of like waxy. And you like breathe it in and it tastes terrible and it smells really weird, but you
like
really
old man breath.
It smells like mothballs. If anybody knows what mothballs are. Like mothballs. Or like when you wake up in the morning and you have like bad breath and like you have that taste in your mouth. That's what.
Yeah, and it doesn't fucking go, like, you'll smell it again in your life, and you'll be like,
and you're like, that's DMT. You know, but sometimes it's just your bad breath in the morning because your brain actually secretes really small amounts of DMT. It's found in everything in nature also, which is really cool. Any living thing has DMT in it in some amount. But science doesn't know a lot about DMT or why it works the way it works, I don't think.
I agree. Anyways, big breath.
Yeah, you take a big breath, you hold it in. Sorry. I was like, big breath.
I do the same shit.
No, it's okay.
I always get off track.
You take a big breath, you hold it in, and when you exhale, you pretty much are shot through the reality of space and time into a new dimension. It can be different for everyone, but for me, my last experience was literally the most beautiful experience on psychedelics that I think I've ever had. I was listening to a Blackmail song. You know, Tyler and Tucker were like making sure that I was like breathing and that I was okay. And like, it doesn't affect your breathing or anything like that, but it's good to have somebody there with you. If you're going to do it, just like make sure, you know, if you have a seizure or something, like that someone's there. Not that it would cause that, but
you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Everybody's body's different. It's going to react differently. So it's good to just have somebody with you that can take care of stuff if they need to. And I was kind of like falling through these dimensions of colors and shapes, and like my eyes were closed. I like took the breath out, like laid back on my couch, shut my eyes, and I was introduced to this spirit bird person. I don't know how else to explain it, but my spirit bird person was basically telling me, you know, that or not really telling me like out loud, but it was more like these internal thoughts. And it was like, I was having these thoughts and that spirit was just comforting me and making me feel like validated and making me feel very like I'm on the right track. So at that time in my life, I was really like struggling with, what am I supposed to be doing with my career? Like, how am I supposed to be interacting with the world? What are things that I need to share? And I was just really validated and like comforted by the fact that I am on the right path. Like, I am doing what I should be doing. And since then, I've really like honed in on what I want to do with my career. I've also started doing this podcast, which is really cool. And just doing more art and sharing things in a way that feels really like soul fulfilling to me. It is really hard to explain how beautiful that experience was with words. It is something that you really have to just experience for yourself.
And I know a lot of people say that a lot of the things that you're experiencing in a DMT trip, especially, are things that we don't have human communication for, because they're concepts or ideas that we don't really have a large understanding of already, except for people who have had these experiences and collectively like feel like that deep inner knowing of, you know, what's going on, but you still don't have the words to describe it because it's not something that's like we experience to
So
have words for.
intuitive, yeah.
Right.
There's no words to experience. Like, if you can imagine falling through dimensions of colors and like shape,
Right.
but it's so much more than that. It's so much
Right.
more than that.
And so much of like the comfort that you feel is such like it's something that's hard for me to describe to people as well, of just like this deep inner knowing that you have. Like, it's just this deep intuition of a yes, or this deep intuition of a like just what this experience is communicating to you. And it's something that's very personalized, and it's something that not everyone, I feel like people develop that connection with themselves after psychedelics, especially. Some people have it naturally, people who are just like natural intuitives, of even when I tell people like, I just know, or when you have that feeling of, I just know, I just know, I just know, it's that, but with the whole experience of like, that entity didn't necessarily have to say anything to Noelle for her to understand, or for her to feel the like acceptance or the like comfort. It's just like that deep feeling of you just know.
You just feel so at peace. Like, and I think it can be different. That might not be your experience if that's not what it's supposed to be. And I know people who've had very different experiences that I would encourage you to look up DMT experiences if you're interested at all, because they range so much. Like,
So personalized.
yes, each person's experience is very, very different. It's amazing. I definitely have a lot to say about DMT. I think, and when we talk about ayahuasca,
Yeah, we can do a whole episode on
we'll
DMT and
talk more.
ayahuasca.
Yeah, because you can go so much more into it, and there's some really interesting like authors that have some resources I could share too. Mdma and ketamine are some other substances that I have had psychedelic experiences on. MDMA is a very interesting one. It makes you feel very loving, open, connected to the people around you. And when I say I've had psychedelic experiences on MDMA, it's not like the whole experience is psychedelic, but there have been points when I have taken it that have been very psychedelic feeling. Just like the connectedness, I think, that it brings you to other people is like the part of that's the most psychedelic, but it also is definitely like a party drug. Like, people use it as like a party drug. I've used
What's
it.
the difference? So I'm asking this not only for myself, but I know other people ask this too. What is the difference between like MDMA, Molly, and ecstasy?
So they're all kind of muddled together, honestly. MDMA is like, that's the shortened form of like the scientific word.
Right.
So there's MDMA and there's MDA. And basically the compound's just a little bit different. The scientific like structure of the molecule, the compound, is a little altered. I think ecstasy, technically, the way I know the drug at least, is that ecstasy is like MDMA, and Molly is like MDA. And honestly, like really do your research about this chemical if you're going to take it, this drug, because does have like some negative side effects if you use it incorrectly. You need to protect your brain.
And it's really easy to get laced or like something that's not pure.
It's really easy, yeah, to have things in it that you don't want in it. So like testing your drugs is super important. Taking the right dosage. There's a website called erowid.org. It's spelled EROWID.
I'm gonna link it in the notes too for
erowid.org. So definitely. So the cool thing about Erowid is any substance that you're interested in learning about is going to be on Erowid. It's going to be listed from pharmaceuticals to ibuprofen to DMT and LSD and MDMA. All those things are listed. You can look at experiences that people have had. They have dosage. They have like tips and tricks on how to correctly identify what's commonly mixed with it. You can, I think, even order testing kits through their site if you're interested in testing your drugs, which I would highly recommend. I test everything that
if you do raves and stuff like that, please test your drugs.
Just test them. Like, it's not that hard. I test everything I take. It's really
fentanyl is so common right now, and it's very, very lethal. So please test your drugs.
Yes. And yeah, so the difference between like MDA and MDMA is really like not a lot. I think MDMA can be a little bit more like emotionally like lovey-dovey type feelings, and I think MDA can be a little bit more like energetic and like ready to party type feeling. Right. For me, I have had like psychedelic type experiences with those drugs, but it's also a party drug. It's a slippery slope. You need to be careful with what you take with it and just really educate yourself if you're gonna take that. Another similar one to, I mean, it's not similar to MDMA, but another drug that people use in a party setting a lot that I have had really profound experiences with psychedelically at home is ketamine. Ketamine, someone's gonna say, is a horse tranquilizer. I know it's a horse tranquilizer. It's also used on ambulances. It's also used in everyday medicine at hospitals. So while yes, they use it in a veterinary setting to sedate animals for.
Also, side note on that before I forget, is that they also have, I'm pretty sure both MDMA and ketamine controlled like psychotherapy.
Therapy, yeah.
Where you can be given a dose in a clinical setting and they just leave you the fuck alone. They just let you have clinical supervision so that it helps with like, I'm pretty sure it's used for like depression, addiction, anxiety, anything that you would take a typical like.
There's a bunch of studies done. MAPS.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's like MAPS. MAPS. Is it just MAPS?
I think so.
Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic something.
Yeah, something like that.
We'll link it also.
Yeah, we'll link that too.
MAPS has if you're actually interested in how that psychotherapy works and what the scientific like findings are behind it, MAPS has done so many studies and worked so hard for us to be able to have these assisted psychotherapy. In Colorado, there's assisted psychotherapy too. Like, obviously you have to, meet a certain requirements to be in those programs, but it is so cool what people have done with that. Ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin, I think, is like what they're working on. But
okay. Anyways, ketamine.
Yeah, so ketamine, horse tranquilizer. It is a very crazy experience. It is a dissociative analgesic. So your body gets numb. It's really good for pain. That's why it's used in medicine. And it does not affect your breathing. So that's unlike other anesthesia can and other like fentanyl is a pain medication. Mm-hmm. It's much safer for doctors to use ketamine because it doesn't affect your breathing, unlike fentanyl, which does. So it's just one less thing for them to have to manage when they give you ketamine. And there's some really skewed information, especially around the Elijah Mcclain case around ketamine. Yes, he got a huge dose of ketamine, and I can't say that it didn't affect him and his like passing, but what I can say is that 6 people on top of almost anybody would probably suffocate them. It's actually just like a really controversial thing in medicine right now, because some parts of medicine, like paramedics, are like being not being able to use that as much as they could in past protocol, but it really does dissociate you in high doses. In low
Wait,
dose,
what was that case called? So in case someone has a question about it.
Elijah Mcclain. It was a
Okay.
case in Denver, and it basically was a young man who was like a smaller man. I don't know how much he weighed, but he didn't weigh very much, like on the lower end. And he had mental health like issues, but he was basically getting pestered by the police in Denver and Aurora, and he was kind of like having a moment, and the police had to like detain him and stuff, and they gave him ketamine, the paramedics did, but also there was a bunch of policemen like holding him down, like pinning him to the ground, and he ended up dying, which was really terrible. But there is a lot of controversy between if he died because of the dosage of ketamine that he was given or why he actually died. And I believe that he died because he was pinned to the ground by a bunch of police officers, and he was having a panic attack and not breathing, and there was people on top of him, so he couldn't actually take full breaths, right? I don't
And then
think
he can't feel.
and maybe the ketamine like did have some type of
They shouldn't have been, if he already had ketamine, they shouldn't have. Yeah, I could go on a tangent, but I won't. Anyways, look up the case if you're curious. You can come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely good to be informed, but for me, I've done ketamine in really high dose, not really high doses, but in relatively high doses. And it has been the most ego death that I've ever experienced in my life. It's really important to do it in a setting where you feel safe, because you can't really walk when you do high doses. Like you can.
Will you explain what a K-hole is too?
Oh yes, a K-hole. My favorite place. No. A K-hole is like basically when you are so dissociated from your physical like body that you are just like a puddle. You're just a puddle, and you're just experiencing these dimensions of like time and space. I can't explain.
Would you say that maybe it would induce almost like astral travel? Because that's the best way I can describe to people like that feeling of dissociation from your body.
You feel like you're in a different universe, universe. Okay, and you're experiencing things in a completely different way. I've had my body turn into Tetris blocks. Not my body, but I've turned into Tetris
your consciousness
and like fallen through a spiral hole of Tetris blocks and just like been so completely dissociated from my body. But it is so healing, because that dissociation makes you just realize you literally feel like you're dying the first time you have a K-hole experience, you will literally feel like you are dying. And you, like I said, once you take a substance, you got to be ready to go. You are committing to doing that thing, right? So you just surrender to it, let the experience happen. And some of the realizations that I've had about connectedness doing ketamine are so interesting. Some of the dimensions that I have traveled to doing ketamine are so interesting. And it's really just me laying in my bed with my eyes closed, experiencing this thing. But it is a full body mind hallucination type experience. And that's why I would say that it is psychedelic. It's not something that you're doing. People do it in public settings in low doses, like at raves and stuff all the time. The last rave I went to, I did a little bit too much, and we were watching a show, and I think we saw Megan Thee Stallion and I did a little bit too much ketamine. And then after that, I laid down and just took a little nap, and then I was fine. I was good to go. But doing it in public, probably wouldn't recommend unless you're like versed.
Right, versed.
Spend some time in that space, because
that's any drug, you guys. Like, honestly,
it's easy to do too much. It's any drug, really. Even alcohol. I mean, like, come on now.
Right. Like,
I see you people getting
be versed. Be versed before you
just
publicly
know yourself.
Present
exactly.
yourself.
Just know yourself. But in a private setting at your house with someone you trust, can be super influential. If anyone has questions about ketamine, I would love to answer them. It's hard to explain. Like, I don't know.
Yes, hit her up on
It's hard
Instagram
to
or
explain.
something.
If anybody has any questions about any of these substances, either
Hit us up.
on Instagram or, yeah, just let us know.
Okay. I feel like we kind of touched on this as we were talking. Yeah, because I feel like my biggest lesson was just like that. Because we were going to talk about our biggest lessons and how they changed us, and then like what we realized most about ourselves and the world around us as well. But I feel like we touched on that. Just the interconnectedness and just like my own personal trauma, and in a way that made it very easy for me to digest and process, like, these are the things that need to change if this is the outcome that you want. And then just realizing that
so different for everyone too. Like, you're all gonna have very different experiences, but
Mhm.
those experiences I can guarantee will be life-changing for you.
Right. And very impactful, and you'll never forget them. Even if you only did psychedelics once, like, it's going to have a profound impact on you, positively. And what else? I don't know that.
Favorite thing is your favorite thing LSD?
Yeah,
Psychedelics.
probably. It depends though, because like you said, I really like mushrooms. I really love microdosing, and that's, yeah, I love microdosing mushrooms, but for large doses, I would prefer LSD.
I love,
and it's cheaper. You can get it, like, you can get it the same dose of like an eighth of shrooms cheaper with acid.
Yeah, I think that I really love ketamine. I don't know how to it's really hard to explain that experience, because
I know it's very therapeutic.
It is so interesting, but ketamine is one of my favorite things because it's like, it wears off after a little while. It's only like a couple hours of a type of commitment type thing. LSD is hard for me because of the time commitment, but
you do have to prepare. Yeah.
DMT by far is the most beautiful psychedelic experience I've ever had.
Yes. I really want to have a profound DMT experience. I would probably want to do it with someone just so they could not do it at the same time, but do it so that they could
definitely do
be there. So, because I think I want to, while I experience it, I want to try my best to like speak what I'm seeing. Zuko is freaking out.
Oh, like write some things down.
Right, because I know some people will like do it by themselves and they'll record themselves and just try to like out loud journal while it's happening, because
it's hard to remember after.
Right, exactly. So, hey, Zuko, chill out. He always does this. He thinks I'm talking to him, so he'll like start nibbling on me, but it low-key hurts. So, but yeah, I think we kind of touched on like what the experiences taught us. About myself, I feel like it taught me, I don't know, I feel like it gave me a lot of grace with myself.
Yeah, I think it just really teaches you how to like deal with your internal stuff that you have going on
in a non-judgmental way.
Yeah, it just gives you a new perspective, a new light on a situation that is really healing, and you can look at difficult situations in your life with a new light and a new perspective, and have like really profound realizations around things that may or may not like be a struggle for you. Even things that you think you may have already dealt with, you will like come to realize differently through psychedelics. It just really helps with integrating your traumas, your experiences, your emotions into your life.
Just experiencing and understanding life at a deeper level.
Yeah.
If anything, if you don't have traumas, or I feel like everyone has a little bit of something going on.
I think a trauma is really relative.
Yeah, like, I agree.
It's a very relative term. Like everyone has trauma, because trauma can be anything from like, I don't know.
Like, it doesn't have to, like, something that would be traumatic for me. Something traumatic for me may not be something that's traumatic for the next person.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very relative to like who you are as a person. So, psychedelics, I think everyone could benefit from them. Everyone could benefit from them for sure. Everyone does not have to, but it's been super impactful for me as a person. I don't know who I would be. And I think there are like obviously everything has its risk factor. There are things about taking psychedelics like that I'm sure I've been affected by and will be affected to like into my life. But to me, those risks and those like things, like maybe the forgetfulness that I have around those experiences, like I can't always remember the exact details of those experiences because it is hard to remember sometimes. But the like long lasting lessons that I have taken from those experiences, even if I don't remember the details, have been worth it to me to like have those side effects or whatever.
Right. I agree. I think that's a good place to wrap up.
All right.
But thank you everyone for listening. If
Yeah.
you guys have any questions, you can DM us on Instagram. We do have that. Ow, Zuko. He always cheats when we play tug of war. He bites me. But modestly metaphysical is just the kind of like podcast advertising platform. Then she has her art page, Cosmic Connections, with K's instead of C's. And then Wildflower Noella, or just Noel, and then Noella. Okay, it's W. You can go ahead. I don't want to fuck it up.
FLWRNOELA is my personal
WLDFLWR.
We can just link it.
Yeah.
We'll
link it. And then mine is Mind Body Kara. So
maybe I should change my Instagram handle.
No, I like yours. It's just I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm not fucking it up.
It's not super easy to say.
But anyways, DM us if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you want to hear more about. We're still definitely doing a full episode on her ayahuasca and a little bit more about DMT. So other than that, it's typically Easter, but thanks. It's a full moon, so write down anything you want to let go and release. The energy should still be there today. It was technically yesterday, but yeah. So thanks for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll talk to you next week.